Thank you. Can you hear me? Anyway, greetings and welcome to the 132nd annual meeting of the Pequot Library. 132 years, that's pretty good. My name's Nelson North, and it's my honor to be the president of the Board of Trustees, and I welcome you here today. The first portion of the meeting will consist of the business of the library. Is that better? Thank you. Anyway, and that will then be followed by our guest speaker, Vin Coppola. So let's address the first item of business, which is the approval of the minutes of the 2020 meeting. Everybody should have them in their lap. If you had gone online, you can see them. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the 2020 meeting. I have a motion in the back. Do I have a second? I have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will then ask the secretary to cast one vote of acceptance. My report, you might want to get a bottle of water for this. Or scotch. This past year was one of really significant achievements despite the challenges that we faced from COVID-19. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But the accomplishment of which I am most proud, and what we should all be most proud, is the fact that we replaced a 125-year-old tile roof. The completed cost was $1.6 million. Because it wasn't just tile, as you know. Once you take something off of an old building, there's something underneath it, and it's never good. So it came in at 1.6. Through the incredible, and I mean truly incredible efforts of our staff, our trustees, and the many, many, many friends of Pequot Library, we raised every single penny of that in 15 months. We paid all our bills. We never had to go into the endowment, and we never had to draw on the line of credit. I mean, that is truly remarkable, and again, I thank you all. Now that our building is secure, and the collections and the books therein are secure, we are in a very strong position. As you'll see financially, we're in a very strong position to deal with the new challenges, and there will always be challenges, as well as we are now able to seize upon any opportunities that will help us advance our position in the community and serve our members better. The libraries don't stand still. They keep going forward. So, I would now like to move on to the report of the Nominating Committee. And Lynn Lukoff, if you'll come up here and take the mic. See if that works.
Thank you, Nelson. I'm very happy to make a report from the Nominating Committee. And first, we would like to thank two retiring members, Father Jerry Blasek and Saba Pina, who have served the library for many years and with much devotion. We will miss them very much. The current slate of officers remains in place for this year, so I'm happy to present our slate for new trustees. And they are Caroline Gibson, back there, Ellen Levinson, Belinda Shepard, Matt Wagner, back here, and Deej Webb. Nelson?
Thank you, Lynn. Again, I think we've got some great people coming on, but I now will ask for a motion to approve the slate of new directors. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will now ask the secretary to cast one vote in favor of the slate. Thank you. Okay. Treasurer's report. Now, can you put that slide up, Tom? If you can't read it, that was intended. Unfortunately, both our treasurer and assistant treasurer are not here today, so you're going to have to put up with me for a few more minutes. Fiscal year 2021 finances were marked with the fourth consecutive year of net income from operations, which is remarkable considering the impact of the coronavirus on all aspects of our services, from elimination of the January 2020 book sale to canceled fundraising events like Derby Day. These are big ones for us. To convening most of our programming to virtual and, oh yeah, completing again the roof. Our new red tile roof. Can't say that enough. Despite these headwinds, we continue to enhance our quality, programs, and facilities. Just a remarkable historical year in so many ways. The fiscal year ended with a net operating income of $22,400 as compared to prior year's operating income of $19,400. Operating revenues increased more than 45% thanks to the total fundraising efforts for the roof project and annual giving. Total fundraising efforts constituted approximately 74% of the 2021 funding. Other sources of funding include town appropriation, 15%, investments, 5%, and other, that would include programs, rents, and other grants, 6%. Would also like to thank the town of Fairfield for the additional $100,000 of support. And again, that was a big one coming from the town. That's in addition to the usual amount we get. Operating expenses, excluding capital expenditures, that being the roof and whatnot, excluding capital expenditures and resources for future capital and operating expenditures decreased approximately 10% to slightly more than $1.17 million. The reduction in operating expenses was attributable to the ability of management to temporarily reconfigure operations during the pandemic. Thank you, Stephanie. Operations are just beginning to return to pre-pandemic status, and the library is currently in the process of filling some kept personal positions. Majority of expenses were in line with management plans, program changes, and inflationary growth. The library's financial position remains strong, with total assets of $9.47 million and liabilities of only $288,000. There is a significant increase in combined restricted and board-designated endowment funds, mainly due to strong investment returns of the endowment are conservatively managed by Pat Morrow and Morgan Stanley, and we are fortunate enough to have financially experienced finance committee members led by Scott Balkin and Chris Wright, our Vice President of Investments. The biggest tangible asset to Pequot is, of course, the staff and my colleagues on the board, all of whom gave their time and effort every day to ensure that the library continues to be a vital part of the community. This year has been challenging for everyone, and we cannot thank you enough for all your financial and volunteer support. That is the financial report. Does anybody have any questions? Well, actually, okay, good. Thank you. So I'll now ask for a motion to accept the financial report. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Thank you, John. So I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll ask the secretary again to cast one vote to approve. Thank you. Can you tell I'm not the treasurer? Okay, at this point, I am very happy to turn the podium over to our extraordinary executive director who has steered us through this past year, Stephanie Coakley.
Thank you so very much, Nelson. Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Stephanie Coakley, Director of Pequot Library. I am so happy to see all of you here in person, and those of you joining us, we are live streaming this year's annual meeting. Those of you joining us from elsewhere, welcome. The last year has been one of steady maintenance work, I would say, with a conscientious eye on growth for future generations. Now that we have completed the preservation, you've heard it before, we'll say it again, the largest part of our historic building, preserving the roof, we have also simultaneously vastly expanded our online programming with countless exceptional author talks and more. We even took library services and programming beyond our walls, and we visited senior centers, delivered used book donations to older adults and others with little to no access to books, all the while continuing to carefully research, study, and interpret what is only found here at Pequot Library, our special collections of rare books, manuscripts, and archives. Also last year, by simply relocating a display case, we made a permanent home for our John James Audubon Birds of America BN edition on view now in the reading room, and I hope you all have a chance to visit it on your way out this afternoon or come back next week. It'll be on display then. We also sent key items from the special collections to an off-site conservation center in Massachusetts. We're so proud of that work last year. Perhaps most of all, last year we continued the part of our mission involving making our collections accessible to a wide audience, and we moved our K through 12 school programs to an online format, enabling us to continue doing the great work that we've been doing for years, serving students, but yet this time in the form of virtual tours. And the stellar professional team at Pequot Library also created an online exhibition about our Birds of America. We also maintained curbside pickup of books from the circulating collection like other traditional libraries. We took our story times for toddlers onto a virtual format, and we moved our special events and some of our programming outside, and we hosted amazing events on our beautiful front lawn. Our founder, Virginia, I think would be especially proud of that great use of our beautiful grounds. And so, in this fast-paced public association library environment, from my perspective, it isn't too often that we have a chance to pause and reflect. And in recent days, I've been really thinking about, really marveling, frankly, about all that we've been able to do this last year together as a community, and none of this would have been made possible without all of you. And here's my heartfelt thanks to the community for making this possible. We just truly couldn't have done it without all of you. The town of Fairfield support we thank as well, and the professional staff. They're a remarkable crew at Pequot Library. If you haven't gotten a chance to get to know them, they are fantastic, and they share their knowledge and enthusiasm for Pequot Library with all who walk through our doors. And for that, we owe them our deepest appreciation. There's a number of contracted professionals who work with us as well who weren't captured in this photograph. Many of you are in the audience today. I thank you for joining us. And our outstanding board of trustees. They're amazing. Welcome to the new trustees. And led by Board President Nelson North and Vice President Mccann Wilcox, we've been able to do amazing things this last year. You all are so extraordinarily generous with your time and guidance each and every day. Our volunteers, backbone of what makes this library so special, and you each have the courage and dedication. And I want to emphasize that word courage to keep this library the excellent, venerable institution that it is. And I thank you, and I invite us all to extend an applause to the staff, the board, and our volunteers here at Pequot Library. Thank you so very much. The fun part of this afternoon's annual meeting, in addition to our guest speaker, is this opportunity to present 3 awards, and we'll do that now. Our first award goes to, and it is the Hop Perry Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll say that again. The Hop Perry, some of you know and knew him well. The Hop Perry Lifetime Achievement Award goes this year to Joan M. Frost. Joni was unable to join us this afternoon. She's invited her friend Gaylord Meyer to say a few words on her behalf. Gaylord?
Oh, wow, this is wonderful. Due to a prior engagement, Joni could not be here, so she asked me if I would say a few words. These are big shoes to fill, so I will do my very best. Joni said that she was honored to receive the Hop Perry Award, given to many worthies. This is a tribute, and so she said thank you very much. The Pequot Library is a very special place in many, many ways. Important to the community in the variety of programs that it provides, as well as the bibliophiles, given its special collection. I, like many people in Southport, feel blessed to have the resources so close to home, and being affiliated with all this that it offers brings great joy to many. I discovered the Pequot Library 30 years ago when I moved to this area with my 3 children, and as a single mother, I also did research at along with Barbara Weinberg, who was the curator at the time at the American Painting and Sculptures at the Metropolitan Museum. And I did research, and presentations were fairly extensive. Assigned to, at this point, to remit it in depth and for an exhibition for the artist George Cope. The museum archives led me to the long-term dedicated patron of the Pequot Library, Gertrude Grace Sills. She was a historian, a curator, a professor, and to my surprise, she was my neighbor. Ever so gracious and encouraging, she extended her help, her guidance, and introduced me to the riches of the library. Both her invaluable mentoring at the library, its collection, and held many research materials. It enabled me to balance family as well as work. Chrissy Sills loved and nurtured and engaged constantly with the library and my admiration and respect, which led me to my own association with this remarkable resource. I am grateful for this recognition, but I feel a real honorees should be the staff and the volunteers that have dedicated their time and their effort day in and day out, keeping this library growing and active in response to the community in the building, its needs. I wish to thank all of them, and since working together, we as individuals will ensure that this treasure remains an integral part of our lives and for many years to come. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Crane Wood Book Sale Volunteer of the Year. The award goes to Ruth Rolander.
Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Sure. No pressure. That was lovely. Thank you. I love the staff here. Like, thank you. Like Joan Woods, my family moved here, 33 years ago, and we had the wonderful experience of children's piano recitals in this room, and of course the book sales, and also my eldest son was a page when he was 14. He's 39 now. But what I never saw coming was that I would get to know the staff and volunteers here, which happened because of Sandy's era. So like so many others, I was dropping off donations, and I saw Sandy and asked her if I could give her a hand. I meant with the box she was carrying. And next thing I knew, I'd met the entire staff, which has been such a treat to a person. Supportive, warm, welcoming, hardworking. The staff, as we've said earlier, is amazing. And then the volunteers. What a team of wonderful people. I only knew a couple of them earlier in past years and other instances. Most are new to me. It's during the pandemic, to have gotten to meet all these wonderful new people is amazing. And two in particular, if I could mention, Madge, who took me under her wing and trained me. And Doug Freed is unbelievable. He is so knowledgeable and so hardworking, endlessly patient. I have learned more in this last year than I had in the previous 5. And he's also a cheerleader for this wonderful place, and I thank each and every one of you.
Hold on to it. Thank you.
The library's Volunteer of the Year goes to Margaret Rick. Come on down.
You get to say a few words. You get to say a few words.
So nobody told me I'd be talking. This has been such a, we're very fortunate in that for our family, the pandemic was an inconvenience. It wasn't a lot of fun, but we were very fortunate. And one of the things that I felt so fortunate in being able to do was, because I wasn't working, I could give a whole bunch of time, and I thought, where would I be best suited to do that? And here, it was a very quick, I have to put this down. It was a very easy decision. So the staff here is amazing. Stephanie, Caroline, Christine. It's been such fun, and being able to spend time with all of you and all the amazing volunteers has been just terrific. So thank you. It's been a wonderful year, and let's on to the next.
That concludes the awards portion of this afternoon's annual meeting. And next, it is my honor and privilege to introduce you all to our Board of Trustees Vice President Mccann Wilcox, who will introduce today's guest speaker. Koki.
Let's see. Lower. Greetings, everyone. I'm thrilled to introduce Vince Cipolla, whose eclectic and energetic career in the arena of nonprofits is expansive, has been expansive over the decades. Vin has served as chairman or CEO, president or co-chairman of numerous philanthropic organizations, both cultural and civic. When he was head of the National Parks Foundation in Washington, D.C., he worked closely with First Lady Laura Bush to orchestrate the annual tree lighting ceremony for the White House. When he was at the Municipal Art Society in New York City, he spearheaded the MAS Summit, which is an annual conference that brings together preservationists and planners for conversation. It's a wonderful event. Vin has been head of several arts organizations, including the Institute of Contemporary Arts in Boston and the Arts Arena in Paris, France. And he has several environmental efforts that he has run, which are Sailors for the Sea and Oceana. The list goes on, and it's truly remarkable. But now, Vin is, my voice is weird here. Vin is adjunct professor at the Columbia Graduate School of Architecture, Preservation, and Planning, and he is president and CEO of Historic New England, the largest and oldest regional preservation organization in the United States. He will speak to us about that platform this evening, but first, I want to introduce the person who provided the foundation from which enabled Vin to accomplish so much, and that is his wife, the artist Celine McDonald. Let's give a shout out to Celine. And now it's Vin's turn. We'll lift this up a little.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It is great to be with you. It is great to be in person. Holy cow. All right. Cook-Ann, thank you so much for that really lovely introduction. I ditto your calling out Celine for thanks. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Nelson, for the warm introduction. Stephanie and Grace, thank you so much for the help in making tonight happen. Christine, thank you, and I may be calling on you again as I manage these slides and videos. Tom back there, thank you for resolving all the technical issues. Congratulations to this community on everything that you have done over the last year during this difficult time. Congratulations on the roof. And also to this evening's honorees for all that you've done for the library. Congratulations to all. Okay, and I've got a prompt here for some slides I'm going to be showing you, and you can hear me okay, right? All right. Every region has its own identity, but in the United States at least, I'm not sure there is a part of the country with a stronger one than New England. Whether it's sports fans or cider donuts or lobster or lighthouses, the traditions, landmarks, and stereotypes of this place are recognized far and wide. At Historic New England, we hear the words New England and we think home. Not just home to the people who grew up here, as I did in Massachusetts, we think of New England as home of innovation, from the nation's earliest public libraries, schools, and parks, to the vaccines that make it possible for us to meet here today. And it's the idea, this idea of New England as home, an inclusive home, where everyone is welcome, that is changing the way we research and share the region's history. Home is also the primary lens through which we share this history with the public. In a typical year, more than 200,000 people visit Historic New England's collection of 38 historic homes and farms. It's a unique collection acquired not because of the fame or notoriety of the people who lived there, although it does include the homes of a globally renowned architect, a beloved New England novelist, one of the first professional interior designers, and some of the region's most prominent, But from its founding in 1910, when it was known as the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities, Historic New England has been committed to a vision of preserving life as it is lived by everyday people. I'm excited to share with you the ways in which we fulfill that mission, as well as the ways in which we've fallen short. And I'll share with you our action plan for expanding the stories we tell at these historic homes to include everyone in our vision of New England as home. But first, let's talk about Historic New England's collections and why they are so important. There's no other organization in the United States that's as comprehensive in its approach to preserving an entire region's history. This begins with our collection of 38 historic properties open to the public, each with its own unique story. Historic New England's property collection spans 4 centuries, including not only the oldest wood frame house in New Hampshire, Portsmouth's Jackson House, built in 1664, but also the 1938 home of Bauhaus founder Walter Gropius in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Here in Connecticut, if you haven't already, you must see Roseland Cottage in Woodstock, Connecticut, the 1846 Gothic Revival summer home of the Bowen family. It is stunning. Our historic farms, including Casey Farm and Watson Farm, overlooking Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island, maintain some of the agricultural traditions set by indigenous peoples centuries before the arrival of European settlers. No matter which historic property you visit or which era is represented, the New England spirit of innovation is apparent wherever you may go. 2021, in some ways, has been the year of Maine properties. Our 38th property, actually, was opened just this summer in Dresden, Maine. It's called Bowman House. It sits on a half a mile of the Kennebec River. It is absolutely astonishing. The landscape is intoxicating. At Hamilton House in South Berwick, Maine, we finished a meticulous restoration there, including restoring the original wallpaper or reproduction of the original wallpaper in the home. It's really a remarkable house in Maine. And over the summer, we had the great fortune of picking up, because of our fabulous landscapes, a terrific number of in-person events, from opera and film to all kinds of things happening on our properties, including New England's largest crafts fair, which was last weekend in Connecticut at Roseland Cottage. It's every year. If you have not been, go next year. And I was there last weekend, and it was really, really something. And the objects that fill these houses are a crucial part of the story. Historic New England has amassed the most comprehensive collection of the region's domestic objects, more than 150,000, half of which are on view in the homes in which they were used. Although the collection includes works of art by the likes of Gilbert Stuart, John Singleton, Copley, and Henry Moore, it's the everyday items that form its backbone, from furniture to clothing to cookware. We also hold one of the 2 largest collections of historic wallpaper in the United States. Our object collections are so extensive that we need an entire building to preserve and care for the pieces that aren't on view to the public. Historic New England's regional office in Haverhill, Massachusetts, is a former shoe factory. It's half of what was once the world's largest shoe factory, devoted largely to the conservation and care of these objects. And beyond these objects, Historic New England holds a vast collection of primary sources in its library and archives of more than 1.5 million pieces. Our founder, William Sumner Appleton, was a voracious collector of images, postcards, ephemera, architectural drawings, and most importantly, photographs. Our archival collection paints a fascinating portrait of rural and urban New England from the 19th century to today. Verna Reed's famed photographs for Life magazine, photographs of the construction of the Boston subway system, and the collection of architect Royal Barry Wills' the father of the Cape Cod House, are among the highlights. We also have an extraordinary collection of work by New England's 19th century women photographers, including Emma Lewis Coleman and Mary H. Northend. This archival collection is growing every day, capturing history as it happens, with recent acquisitions such as photographer Catherine Taylor's portraits of New Englanders during the COVID-19 pandemic and John D. Wolfe's capturing of Boston's Chinatown. The Historic New England Library and Archives is an extraordinary resource, like the Pequot Library, for authors, students, filmmakers, researchers, and businesses throughout the region and the nation, telling the most complete story of life in New England over the centuries. If at any time, if any of you would like to visit historic New England property across the region, all 6 New England states, 38 properties, let me know. And we'll be sure to give you the access that you deserve to have. And everyone here has my coordinates, and there are many friends in the room, and it's great to see you, by the way. So I'm very, very happy to arrange your tour for you. In addition to preserving the past, Historic New England works to ensure the livability of our region for the future. Our preservation easement program is a national model protecting 116 privately owned properties, from houses and farms to churches and landscapes, from significant alteration or neglect. Our team works with cities and towns throughout the region to advise on local preservation strategy that protects important buildings well before the wrecking ball is in play. And because the best way to learn about history is to experience it up close, our school and youth programs provide New England's children with unique hands-on education at our historic sites and in communities. More than 40,000 children each year participate in these programs, which use historic resources to teach about archaeology, farming, ecology, mapping, their own family history, and so much more. In Rhode Island, Project Chick combines a visit to Casey Farm to see our heritage breed chickens with an opportunity to hatch baby chicks in the classroom. The program is so popular that nearly every child in the Ocean State participates in it by the time they finish school. The way old houses are built can teach us a lot about conservation and smart energy use, but we must act now to ensure that they withstand the effects of climate change. In this video, my colleague Ben Havoc, Historic New England's team leader for property care, tells us more. It's a very quick clip, and it should work. Yay.
When they had these houses, they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have central heating systems. They opened the windows. They figured out ways to not use fossil fuels for their properties. We opened the front and rear door of a main central hall house, and the whole building ventilates the way it did 200 years ago. Still works today. And you can really learn something from that. You can learn how to design more sustainably. You can learn how to live more sustainably and with more thought towards how everything interacts, nature and the structure.
That wasn't my breath in the microphone. That was the wind at the Eustis Estate in Milton, Massachusetts. Whoop.
When they had...
There we go. Okay. It has taken 111 years to build this organization's holdings, and to understand how that happened, we have to go to the birth of the preservation movement. In the late 19th century, societal changes such as industrialization and immigration incited change in America's urban centers. In New York City, advocates fought to save colonial-era houses from demolition as early as the 1830s. The 1765 Morris Jumel House mansion, the oldest surviving house in Manhattan, became a house museum in 1903. These efforts to save historic homes expanded into a more holistic movement to preserve a broader range of urban architecture, culminating in the creation of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1961 and the passage of the city's landmarks law in 1965. These things, as we may recall, were also further catalyzed by the demolition of the original Penn Station and the later threat to demolish Grand Central. And as Koken and some others know, while I was with the Municipal Art Society, I've worked very hard on the Penn Station issue and the creation of Monahan Station in the Farley Post Office, as well as what to do about Penn Station, but that's a talk for another time. Meanwhile, in Boston, a community effort to save John Hancock's house in Beacon Hill from demolition in 1863 was unsuccessful. Bostonians realized that they would need to make a proactive plan to ensure the survival of other historically significant locations in the city. William Sumner Appleton is considered the country's first professional preservationist, an avid collector who kept detailed scrapbooks of all his activities. He was a natural convert to the burgeoning preservation movement. In 1905, he worked to ensure the successful preservation of the Paul Revere House in Boston's North End. In 1909, after learning of plans to significantly alter an 18th century house that was important to the story of the Battle of Lexington, he decided to establish a nonprofit organization, the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities, now known as Historic New England. The organization was established in 1910, and the following year, the Swett Isley House, a former 17th century tavern in Newbury, Massachusetts, became its first acquisition. In 1916, the organization acquired Harrison Gray Otis House in Boston at the foot of Beacon Hill. Both Otis House and Swett Isley House remain open to the public for tours today. Historically, the focus on preserving property naturally privileges those who were in the position to own it. Therefore, preservation organizations, including Historic New England, have built collections of properties named after wealthy individuals of European descent. These folks were more likely to leave an archival record of their personal and professional lives than the working class immigrants and, of course, people of color. Early preservation efforts did not reflect, or early preservation efforts rather did reflect a nativist streak. The colonial revival movement of this era, which is represented in Historic New England's properties such as Phillips House in Salem, Massachusetts, was an expression of the still young nation's nostalgia for the Revolutionary era. It also sparked the preservation of many landmarks that we so greatly value today. The challenge facing us now is to explain and demonstrate the enormous value that historic preservation can bring to our communities holistically, far beyond saving and treasuring great houses. In the middle of the 20th century, the preservationist and activist Jane Jacobs organized to stop cities from demolishing old buildings in the name of urban renewal. This quotation from her 1961 book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, illustrates why. She foresaw that the demolition of modest housing that was accessible to low and middle-income citizens would result in the affordability crisis that we see in major cities today. This crisis of affordable housing plagues many New England cities right now. According to a recent study by the Boston Indicators Project, 14% of renters in Massachusetts were behind on rent, with Black and Latinx renters more likely to fall behind. Exacerbated by the pandemic, the number of families experiencing homelessness in Boston rose by nearly 9% from 2019 to 2020, and the same is true for New York. Activists like Jacobs are a rebuke to the idea that historic preservation is only for the privileged. We must continue to demonstrate, as Jacobs did, that preservation can be about looking forward to build more equitable communities rather than remaining stuck in the past. I had the incredible privilege of for several years running something called the Jane Jacobs Medal, which was supported by the Rockefeller Foundation to recognize those who really provide very distinguished accomplishment in keeping our cities more livable. And the honorees range from Robert De Niro for the founding of the Tribeca Film Festival after 9/11, to Bette Midler for the Restoration Project, to Roseanne Haggerty, MacArthur, a Connecticut person and MacArthur genius, and for her extraordinary expertise in how to deal with and end, really, which is her charge, and mission in life, homelessness, to Robbie Hammond and Josh David for the Highline. and many, many others, but to help bring forward the principles and values and thinking of Jane Jacobs, who I've been devoted to as a young preservationist since I was 17. So I always have to get a little bit of Jane Jacobs into my talks. For years, Historic New England has identified stories in our collection that broaden the range of identities represented in our history. I'm excited to share some examples, a few examples of these stories with you, along with a bit of our plan to broaden the lens through which history is shared at our historic sites. One way to acknowledge a fuller perspective of the New England experience is to reach further into the past and include the perspectives of the indigenous people who lived here before European settlement. At Casey Farm in Saunderstown, Rhode Island, that means partnering with indigenous artists and organizations to provide a platform to their perspective for those who visit the farm. This summer, we installed the sculpture Three Sisters Rainkeep by Allison Newsom and Deborah Spears Moorhead. It honors the indigenous heritage of the land and the lessons of sustainability and harmony with nature that this heritage teaches. The piece tells the Eastern Woodlands creation of the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, which grow near where the sculpture is installed. The upper canopy of the sculpture collects dew and rain, which flows downward into a 500-gallon rain barrel. Gardeners and children at Casey Farm programs draw water from its spigot to nurture the garden beds as they absorb the story it tells. Casey Farm is so intoxicatingly beautiful. If you haven't been to these two farms in Rhode Island, one is on Saunderstown facing Jamestown, and the other, Watson Farm, is in Jamestown facing over the water from Jamestown to Saunderstown. And they are transformative, really, when you are walking and enjoying these incredible historic New England properties. In the farmhouse, a display combines Narragansett artifacts discovered during archaeology at the farm with contemporary objects made by indigenous artists. 200-year-old shoe soles found in the walls of the farmhouse lie near deerskin moccasins made in 2018 by artist Silvermoon LaRose for her son.
Part of the reason we did the partnership with Casey Farm was to decolonize the space and to remind people that not only were we here, but we're still here, and that indigenous people are connected to this place, even as it's being occupied by others. Yo no weekend, yo no weekend, we hey yo no weekend ooks.
That was Lauren Spears, who is the museum director of the Tomaquag Museum, describing the significance of the farm to the Narragansett people. By the way, if you're interested in more information or context, all of these clips are part of a larger video story on the Historic New England website. And this one in particular is really incredibly moving. Another important aspect of telling the fullest New England story is acknowledging the range of sexual identity among those who lived in the past. Historic New England has been a leader in presenting the life stories of people who today would likely identify as part of the LGBTQ+ community. In Gloucester, Massachusetts, Beauport, the Sleeper Mccann house is the labyrinth home of one of America's first professional interior designers, Henry Davis Sleeper. Sleeper was part of an energetic social circle in the exclusive Eastern Point neighborhood overlooking Gloucester Harbor. Because Sleeper was a gay man who never married and never had children, the story of Beauport upends the traditional house museum structure of a large family and its descendants. At Beauport, home is a place for groups of friends, including Isabella Stewart Gardner and painter Cecilia Beau, to gather. Sleeper's correspondence with close friend A. Pyatt Andrew, who later served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, paints a vivid portrait of their social life. Meanwhile, in South Berwick, Maine, the home of Sarahorn Jewett draws visitors to learn about the life of the 19th century novelist. Recently, Historic New England reinterpreted the museum experience to include the story of Jewett's relationship with writer and philanthropist Annie Adams Fields. After Fields' husband died, she began a decades-long relationship with Jewett. Although Adams rarely accompanied Jewett to their South Berwick home, the two moved through late 19th century Boston society as a couple. Again, written correspondence provides tremendous insight into the relationships between people who lived centuries ago. Let's hear an excerpt of a letter from Sarahorn Jewett to Annie Adams Fields.
Dear love, I'm so often sending you messages, and I hope the little white mother don't forget them, by the way. Are you sure you know how much I love you? If you don't, I can't tell you. But I think of you, and I'm always being reminded of you. I am yours most lovingly. S.O.J.
It's a point of pride for Historic New England that scholars of history use both Beauport and Sarahorn Jewett House as resources for understanding how sexual identity was perceived in the past. We began hosting special tours of these museums for Pride Month several months ago and partnered with Boston's History Project, which documents LGBTQ+ history on special talks and tours. The lives of Black New Englanders are chronically unrepresented in Historic New England sites. And in really all New England historic sites. Organizations that share 18th century history are grappling with how to interpret the region's complicated relationship to slavery. At Saywood Wheeler House in York Harbor, Maine, Historic New England recently introduced a new tour experience that focuses the story of the house not just on the wealthy Saywood family, that's their home, but on the Black and indigenous people they enslaved in the 18th century, Prince, Cato, Dinah, and Bonetto. Just over the New Hampshire border in Portsmouth, the home of Governor John Langdon is an exemplar of high-style Georgian architecture and a testament to the city's Revolutionary-era wealth. But some of its most compelling stories involve the challenges of living as a Black American in a nation where slavery still thrived in many parts of the country. When 22-year-old Ona Judge escaped enslavement from the home of President George and Martha Washington, the executive mansion in Philadelphia, she sought refuge in New Hampshire. Then Senator Langdon's daughter, Elizabeth, recognized her and spread the word. Although the Fugitive Slave Act had been passed 3 years earlier in 1793, some scholars believe that Senator Langdon may have sent warning to Judge out of deference to the growing abolitionist sentiment of his constituents. By the time the authorities came to look for her in Portsmouth, she had fled to Greenland, New Hampshire, and she was able to evade capture for the rest of her life. Ona Judge's story has received renewed visibility in recent years, in part due to the book Never Caught by Erica Dumstrong Dunbar. Every visitor to Langdon House learns about this important story, which portrays our nation's first president in a somewhat less reverential light than many of us are accustomed to. A lack of documentation about the lives of Black Americans, whether they were free or enslaved, presents a challenge for centering their stories in historical narratives. At Langdon House, we came up with a creative way to include the story of Cyrus Bruce, a freedman who worked for John Langdon and was known for his impeccable fashion sense. So during this time, the local publications would write about Cyrus Bruce's sense of fashion, his extraordinary dress, his elegance, what a striking figure he was, and he was the doorman, the butler for Governor John Langdon in Portsmouth. As part of an artist-in-residence program at Langdon House, artist Richard Haynes Jr. worked with the community to create a visual representation of this Black man whose story largely had gone untold. In his painting, He left the details of Bruce's face undefined as a symbol of those whose stories have been lost to history. Let's hear from the artist about the significance of this project.
This project was a blessing because I was given the opportunity to make an invisible man visible. And the only thing that I had to accomplish this project was the written words that describe Cyrus Bruce. And I used those words to make him visible. As we look at the image, Cyrus Bruce stands at that door. You could see that he has respect for himself. The community had respect for him. He was well dressed, eloquently dressed, and had a strong character. Therefore, Cyrus Bruce, even without a face, is officially visible to society today.
So how does an organization whose primary connection with the public is through historic homes overcome the fact that home ownership was only available to a privileged few? We've taken two approaches. We launched 100 Years, 100 Communities, a project dedicated to partnering with communities beyond our collection of historic sites for special programs and collaborative projects. This initiative generated online exhibitions, oral history projects, and award-winning documentary films. We liked it so much that after the centennial passed, we relaunched it as Everyone's History, a series dedicated to sharing stories of 20th and 21st century history of New England. On this slide, you see a current project, More Than a Market, which chronicles immigrant-owned markets of Burlington and Winooski, Vermont, markets that took on increased importance to their neighborhoods during the pandemic. In We Are Haverhill, Changing Faces of Haverhill's Neighborhoods, photographer Markham Starr shot black and white portraits of Haverhill, Massachusetts, which were paired with oral history interviews chronicling how they came to view the city they call home. This was an important project for us because it helped strengthen our bond between our organization and one of our home communities. As I mentioned earlier, Haverhill is the home of our collections, storage, and conservation center. Few of the oral history should briefly come up.
I would always ask my father, why did you pick Haverhill? What was it about Haverhill? And he really loved the peacefulness.
The neighborhood, it is changing, and there's so much we can do for each other, and we're so strong when we work together.
Either going to someplace or coming from someplace, and what I'm seeing a lot more of, there are more people not using Haverhill as a stepping stone and more putting down the roots here. A lot of those old buildings, even the ones that are a little rough on the outside, they've seen a lot of lives lived in them. It also makes it a very special place, almost kind of sacred a little bit when you think about, all of the history that has happened there.
I don't know if Hebron adopt us or we adopt Hebron, but truly, Hebron is our home.
I would always ask.
Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. One area I'm not really getting into of Historic New England's work today is our very strong commitment to the thinking about and the importance of three-decker, triple-decker housing and worker housing. We have a major initiative underway. It's another talk for the Pequot Library at some point because it really is very, very important work and very important strategic work for the region. And of course, here in Connecticut, we have many cities and towns with a very strong representation in two-family and three-decker architectural type, and the continued performance that these buildings provide to communities. It's an absolutely fascinating and important field of study and work, and very important at Historic New England, so maybe something for another time. Also, as part of Everyone's History, the Haymarket Project chronicles the diverse array of vendors that make up Boston's century-old open-air market, which continues to provide low-cost food to the public and withstand constant surrounding development. This project resulted in a documentary film, a photography exhibition, a book from Arcadia Publishing, a virtual lecture, and of course, a series of walking tours with tastings. We Are Haverhill and Everyone's History projects demonstrates how the New England idea of home goes beyond stately manor houses to encompass a neighborhood, a city, an industry, or a culture. But even as we move beyond the confines of historic houses, the second approach of the two that I'm wanting and so privileged to mention today involves a significant rethinking of the stories we tell at Historic New England's Houses and Farms, and I'm thrilled to announce the launch of a multi-year Historic New England project called Recovering New England's Voices. The voices we amplify and the perspectives we privilege influence the present and the future. In this time of social unrest and redefinition, historical narratives are more important than ever. A complete understanding of the past is the first step in building a more equitable society. As the leading voice for New England's history, Historic New England is launching Recovering New England's Voices to challenge traditional narratives and promote healing, community collaboration, and inspiration. Using research, art, storytelling, and technology, we are creating spaces that amplify marginalized voices. Our sites are becoming catalysts for transformative conversations and for environments welcoming for everyone. The biases that have shaped our storytelling over the past century are not unique to Historic New England, of course. Museums and preservation organizations are amid a great reckoning, and historic sites are rapidly losing relevancy. The public no longer accepts incomplete histories that focus only on the few and the wealthy. Recovering New England's Voices empowers communities to share their own stories and create unique site experiences representing all perspectives in this storied region. In the past, the owner's name associated with a historic site controlled the narrative. In the future, Historic New England will define our sites by their most compelling stories, not necessarily their wealthiest owners only. Recovering New England's Voices is divided into three phases: research, reform, and relaunch. We are thrilled to announce that this robust research initiative has begun. We have 7 incredible PhD scholars working on different aspects of New England history across our 38 sites. These scholars represent the largest single investment in new research on historic properties that Historic New England has made in decades. We at Historic New England in the field of public history know that this work is long overdue. We can no longer accept incomplete stories and histories that have been erased, suppressed, and ignored in the past. Our work is not done until everyone can see their own story in our interpretation of New England's history, and that anyone who wants to can find a home in Historic New England. As we move to the end of your favorite building, as we move to the end of, and one of mine as well. So, and as a former Southporter, as we move to the end of this presentation, I would like to take a moment again to thank the Pequot Library for inviting me here this evening and to congratulate all of you on the fabulous preservation of this beautiful Robert Robertson designed building. This is a wonderful living example of what great architecture can do for a community, in this case, providing an open, welcoming space for the public to gather and learn. These stories that I've shared with you this evening are just the tip of the iceberg, as you can imagine, in terms of what you can find at Historic New England. It's impossible to describe the genuine sense of discovery that comes with touring one of our historic sites, exploring our online collections, which you need a lot of hours of online time because there's so much there, or speaking with one of our many staff experts on preservation, conservation, and New England history. And I hope that you are compelled to find out more. Please visit historicnewengland.org, sign up for our email list. There is so much on our website. And you can follow us on, all those social media channels that sometimes they're good to ignore. But anyway, we are on all of them: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. There are so many stories left to share about this region we call home. It's been a great, great honor to be with you this afternoon. I think I did this right on time, so thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes. I wonder why you're asking that question. As a native of Salem, Massachusetts, right? Yeah. Oh, yes. So we have marvelous museums in Salem. The Phillips House, which I mentioned, is an extraordinary Chestnut Street home of the Phillips family in Salem. And the most popular story there, if you will, for visitors really have to do with the Irish who cared for the house for the Phillips. And the Irish maids, the Irish women who came as young women to Phillips House and spent their entire lives working for the Phillips family. And so Phillips House is an example of some of what I was sharing today, where previously at Historic New England, if you came to a house museum like that, you learn about the owners. And today, if you come to a house museum like that, you're going to learn a lot more than about the owners. And visitors who come really want to know about the staff and those that worked on the property and have an insatiable appetite, really, for that kind of information. So it's a stunning museum, very, very rich content. One of the most delicious pantries you can imagine in terms of the kitchenware and the porcelain, and just that's another big highlight of that tour. Then we have another property in Salem, which is a much earlier period house called the Gibney House. And because that property was cannibalized over the years before we were able to save it, it's really a tour of the bones, if you will, of a house of that the early 1700s. So it doesn't have a collection actually within the house, but rather it's really very much of an architectural tour. Salem is such an important heritage region for historic New England, and has been for years. Recently I was at the House of Seven Gables and visiting them on the really incredible work and education work that they do at that property. So they're sort of a friend property to historic New England. House of Seven Gables? What? The House of Seven Gables?
Yeah. Or the museum, the Peabody Essex.
Oh, the Peabody Essex Museum itself. I think that's probably correct, although the building is, in terms of it being in its original location. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Hi. Well, thank you very much. And if my eyesight is working, I really enjoyed your Pequot Library talk. Am I nailing it? I'm nailing it. That was outstanding. And so thank you for the work that you've been doing as an educator and as really helping amplify that important history and issue in Connecticut. So thank you. That was wonderful. Growing up in small industrial city New England and seeing urban renewal destroy the context of our historic downtowns and eradicating, really ripping away the livability of these places by demolishing important historic and architectural fabric in the name of progress. And while, like many of you, I was too young to really have any language for it, we all sort of experienced the results of urban renewal as it really destroyed, frankly, the core of a lot of our urban centers across the region. And 60 and 70 years later, they haven't recovered. There's still a Swiss cheese out there of brownfields and parking lots, and where the two iconic movie theaters were still in that development. The new never came, and then with, of course, the adjoining sprawl that also happened at the same time, creating this lack of there, where walkability and livability, something that's so enjoyed here in Southport, was really decimated, really. And so as a student beginning to think about this, what was going on in this sort of phenomenon of this stuff, and sort of searching for answers as to how can our civic leaders and people that we admire so end up making decisions that are destroying local communities, and they're just, the examples just go and go and go. We've worked here at Historic New England a lot right now on still recovery efforts for the West End in Boston, which was, it is so shocking to look at the images. I could have shown some of block after block after block, but there are examples of this everywhere, as we all know. So in searching for a language around all of that, a way to look at it, and discovering the writings of Jane Jacobs and her idea of that the cellular activity, that the ecosystem of a place, that the rich and, if you will, the rich and poor, people scurrying over, the messiness of a neighborhood. You can buy a loaf of bread, you can find the plumber, you can go here, you can go there, you can get to a lot of places on foot. That cohesiveness, that there was value in that. Even if it might not have looked so pretty, there was still value in that. Value of the small footprint, not just the big box, but the small footprint. And that when you strip those things away, take them away and lose them, that's it. They're gone. And what's gone with them are the multi-generational businesses, the mom and pops. They can't repot. They can't find another place to be. So Jacobs was ahead of her time in really articulating and describing what was going on in the country. She very famously, as maybe many of you know, she's one of the people really with helping really save Greenwich Village, because Robert Moses wanted to come in with a big east-west highway that was going to go right through Washington Square Park. And she and other women took to the streets to stop that from happening. And she was a fearless preservation activist. She never graduated from college. She is full stop the most influential person in city planning in the last 100 years, but she was not a city planner. And she didn't like preservationists particularly, because she felt that we were all about architectural history and everything perfect and everything beautiful, and forgot about that cellular, organic activity that makes a place, makes a place a home, makes a place livable, where our memories are, and they are worth saving. So for all of that, she gave a voice to a lot of what I was thinking. And the arc of my nonprofit and conservation and preservation professional life, it's so interesting how this person I've never met, keeps coming back up, and then having been asked to help steward her legacy for several years was a real great thrill and honor of mine. Hello there, Elizabeth. Baby carriage brigade. Thank you for that. That's absolutely right. I was saying, you nailed it right on the head there. Thank you.
But we still have problems. We just lost a big issue in the village. Yeah.
I'm well aware. Yes, hi. Thank you so much.
I like the way you brought the smell, the voice, the artifacts, the clothes. Because when you think of just a house, you don't think of that. I'm fortunate to have lived in many old houses. Pay me now, pay me later, but you'll pay me now. But I love the history. I'm curious, what are the criteria for the historic report to take on the project? Because it's right next door in Bridgeport, has the most magnificent homes that are 2 or 3 families living in, but the preservation is magnificent. How do you choose?
We've been thinking specifically about Bridgeport, and the initiative that I had mentioned earlier about 3-decker, 2-decker, 2-family housing and worker housing, and of course, Bridgeport has neighborhoods that very much represent and are very cohesive still in representing that type. Historic New England has property relationships in different ways. The 38 museums, and by the way, our museums are living archives, so when it comes to material culture, the objects, except with a couple of examples where they're really architectural studies or period studies, but that's only really 2 properties or maybe 3. The objects that people lived with are in those houses. And then this vast and extraordinary collection I was referencing, the 150,000 New England artifacts, is the largest collection of artifacts of a region, of this region, obviously, in the world. And something really to see in Haverhill, Massachusetts, 400 years of everything. I mean, it's really quite amazing, is a way of telling a much broader story that transcends 38 house museums as well. But, and then I had also mentioned that we have 116 easement properties where we have conservation, preservation easements on those properties to protect them, but they're owned by, they're privately owned, so they're not open to the public is another way. And then we are beginning to explore more affiliate properties, so properties that we do not own. We have one in Vermont, but that are run by others, so we have a nonprofit partnership with those, which I think is a way in which we can expand. I would say your question is also really relevant because we don't, strategically, we don't need another mansion at Historic New England, right? And so the idea of a diversity of housing type is very appealing to us, and we are studying that. And as I said earlier, our thinking around and work on middle class 3-decker, 2-decker worker housing is a big initiative. So we'll continue to look at Bridgeport, and ideas are very welcome about that. Yes, sir. Hi. That's a really excellent question, and it does take advocacy and activism of individuals, of organizations like this one to help the town of Fairfield appreciate its cultural resources. And if these, I would say that one way of thinking about this is that our cultural fabric is the front line of resilience. And we want to have livable, sustainable communities there that will endure and deepen and prosper for our children and grandchildren. But if we don't take care of the cultural fabric of these places, then they won't be there. in 50 years. After Superstorm Sandy, we all remember mention this anecdote from a New York City perspective, it was the small cultural organizations that responded immediately. And it wasn't just social service organizations in the traditional sense of food banks or providing elder care, also the local historic societies and art museums and dance companies all around the city that really became social service agencies in response because they were on the ground, they understood the communities, they had membership, and they were entrepreneurs. They knew how to organize. And so Pequot Library we are the lifeblood of the communities in which we inhabit. And we are the institutions that are close to the ground and really connected with the neighborhoods that we serve. And our health as institutions is extraordinarily vital to the overall economic health and sustainable health of our communities. And too often people do miss this. They think it's fringe or what can we do, like cut the arts. But that is a very, very slippery slope to be on, I think, as everyone in this community would certainly agree. So in advocacy, which I've done an awful lot of in places like New York and Washington, but other parts of the country, and as we do at Historic New England on a selective basis, we will make the argument of resilience. We will tie it to economic development and vitality and the importance of institutions like this one to remain healthy and strong and growing in communities, to have a complete community, a complete neighborhood, a resilient neighborhood, and a sustainable one. It's an excellent question, and it's one where we can't rest because it's still uphill, isn't it? It's not as understood as it needs to be by a broader public. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you. Really a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. It's very sweet. Thank you. Thank you. It's really an honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Wait, can you imagine a more appropriate speaker for what really, that was spot on. Great. Okay, the best part of the whole night. I need a motion to adjourn. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Good night, all. Thank you. See you next year.